Good morning, everyone, or good time zone, wherever you may be calling in from. Welcome to day 2 of the Symposium on Disability Cultural Centers in Higher Education. Dr. Margaret Fink has given me the distinct privilege of giving some welcoming remarks for the second day of the Symposium on Disability Cultural Centers in Higher Education. And I'm forever grateful for the opportunity to co-plan this conference with Margaret. And so far, our dreams for the DCC Symposium have come to fruition. And I've also been granted the privilege of communicating with our presenters for about a year now to make this happen. And in that time, I learned so much about DCCs. And each time I met with a then potential presenter, I had a growing feeling that the unification of their knowledge in an event like this would be really, really impactful for many of us. And so to my surprise, I can confidently say that yesterday, there were many things that I learned that were new to me that I hadn't heard about in the past year from our presenters, despite being deeply involved in this work. And so to me, that demonstrates clearly how we are really in the early development of the disability culture practitioner profession, if you will. And it shows how much there is really to keep learning. And Margaret and I designed the DCC Symposium days based on 2 themes, past and the future. Yesterday was focused on the past, and we learned about the fundamentals of disability culture, the histories of select DCCs, and how DCCs impact disabled students' experiences on campus. Today, we're learning about the current practices of DCCs and envisioning the future of the discipline, the practice, and the community. To start us off for today, I figured that I would provide you all with 3 takeaways from yesterday, and then 3 hopes for disability futures from the perspective of a young adult who hopes to be continuing to do this work for a very long time. So I have 3 takeaways. The first is disability is a culture, which sounds very simple in our context, but I remember when I first heard the term disability culture about 3 years ago, it really sounded like an oxymoron to me. And it didn't actually make intuitive sense, the term disability and culture put together. And that was indeed due to the scientific and medicalized perspectives of disability that I had been socialized with my entire life, and that many of us had. And as we learned yesterday, disability culture is about recognizing the collective oppression that disabled people have historically faced and continue to face, and other minority groups face, and their intersections. Disability culture is about building a community with people who share common experiences. Disability culture is about our shared history, our art, our kinship, and our humanity. And ultimately, disability cultural values have so much to offer the world. So that was the first takeaway. The second takeaway that I thought of was making change in a matured institution is difficult. Matured institution really just means that the institution is old and historic, and it's hard to change. So from a higher education studies perspective, navigating institutionally created barriers in a practice as old as higher education will take time and struggle. I do want to give major props to those who have worked to establish DCCs over the past many years. Doing something that's essentially never been done before is an incredible achievement, and you should be proud of the work that you've done. Some of these folks had no infrastructural support for disabled students. That is, prior presence of disability culture or disability studies. So like a disability studies department, a culturally minded or focused resource center, and committees. And many turned to protest and activism to get the job done. And this was the case for here, UIC, the University of Illinois, Chicago, which actually had all of those 3 infrastructural supports that I just listed, and still protesting was necessary. Through activism, knowledge sharing, and wisdom, and demanding to get your needs and wants met, there is capacity for administrators to buy into this work and practice. So keep up the pressure and hang in there. Early research, the third takeaway is that early research shows the demonstrable impact on disabled students' lives within higher education. In line with research on other identity cultural centers, research from Dr. Tony Saya and Dr. Liz Thompson shows how disability cultural centers can impact disabled students in incredibly meaningful ways. Students felt represented in a way that they really hadn't before, truly going beyond compliance. And while there are many differences of opinions on whether a disability resource center and a disability cultural center should be combined or separated, there's much agreement that both are necessary and can and should coexist on all colleges and university campuses. So those are my three major takeaways from yesterday, but there's so many more, and I'm sure you all have many other takeaways from yesterday's brilliant presentations. And now these are my three hopes for disability futures. So the first hope that I have for disability futures is moving away from medicalization. In the past year, I've been a part of a master's program in higher education administration, but I've also been taking disability ethics courses with a very prominent disability studies scholar named Carol Gill, who works here at UIC and is huge in the disability history and disability rights movement. One thing that she really made me aware that sort of changed my worldview in the past year was juxtaposing the need for medical services and the experiences of medical ableism. I remember the past year or the past several years, and honestly my entire life, I became resentful of medical practices because of the ableism that I experienced throughout my life. But she reminded me that medical services, accommodations, these are things that disabled people will need inevitably, but we shouldn't take away from that versus the medical ableism that we may experience in the clinical medical encounter or just in everyday life. And so I think that my hope for the future of disability resource centers and influenced by disability cultural centers, perhaps, is that we will move away from a focus on medicalization and focus on balancing the need for medical services and the cultural empowerment that disabled folks deserve, as any other minority group deserves empowerment for their identity. The second hope for disability futures that I thought of was, and something that I'm really passionate about, is the overall expansion of disability definitions. And so that's the recognition of invisible and episodic disability. So I've been thinking about invisible disability for a while now, and I came up with a more updated definition with a few edits that I made this morning. But I created this definition back in February of 2022, because I think that I hear the term invisible disability in so many places now, that's something that should really be considered for the future. And so over the years, I tried thinking of a definition that really encapsulated it, and this is my working definition so far. So the concept of invisible disability recognizes the expansiveness of the disability community to include people with naturally and humanly variant body-mind experiences that face social exclusion and barriers to access and have traditionally not been included in the mainstream perception and conception of disability identity. One major thing that I learned from talking with scholars and just my own research has been that not all invisible disabilities are literally invisible. They might be episodically performed, they might manifest in very unique ways. And invisible disability really gets at how so many experiences of inaccess and inaccessibility of the world just go unrecognized because of visibility politics, which is another thing I always think about as well. how much visibility plays a role in our cultural understanding of disability in everyday life. And so I hope that with the growth of disability cultural centers, that more disabled people will be included in the conversation around disability, and that they will have access and feel more empowered to access these spaces. As someone with invisible and episodic disabilities, I didn't identify as disabled until about 3 years ago, despite having disabilities my whole life. And so I felt power from the term invisible disability, and so many others have as well. So that's something I think everyone should think about, considering the future of the community and growing our family. And speaking of family, my third hope for the disability future, or disability futures, is the growth of the disability community and kinship networks. Especially in the Western world, disability has long been individualized, despite being one of the largest minority populations. I hope that with these new centers being established, disabled folks will have a place to turn to for community building, empowerment, and embracing their identities. Much like how the trans community has built kinship networks and second families, and in line with Dr. Sandy Yee's remarks from yesterday, my wish is that the disability community becomes like a second family to us all and to future generations. So those are my three hopes for for disability futures. Overall, I hope that the growing presence of disability cultural centers within higher education promotes the idea that disabled folks are omnipresent, that we are a community of resilient people, and that we have so much to offer to a world that just doesn't know it yet. So thank you for listening to my remarks, and I will close us out. Or actually, let me see, right? We do have 13 minutes. I'd actually like to open up the space to the audience. So all of you in the audience, the attendees, to share highlights. Oh, Margaret, yes?
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Javin. So I did open the chat, but for some reason it's kicking the captioner back into the chat again. So I want to just take a pause so that the caption can get back to the main room, and they're there. So please continue. Thank you for bearing with the interruption.
It's okay. So to have people share out if they're interested. Margaret, that was for you. Anyways, yeah, we do have about 12 minutes. So if anyone is interested in sharing out what they learned yesterday, or a big takeaway, or something that they hope for the future, feel free to type it out in the chat, or if you would like to unmute your microphone or raise your hand, feel free to do so as well.
This is Margaret reading from the chat. Liz Compton says, "We're not alone. It's always a fight and joy, and more scholars are needed."
Definitely agree. And I think that the research panel yesterday brought a lot of scholars together in the chat. I saw some people exchanging information and discussing new ideas, and that's great. That we need more people to be studying disabled students, disabled people, and advocating for our experiences and the spaces that we occupy.
Two more things have come in through the chat. This is Margaret speaking. So Trail said, oh, who I think is in Dubai, if I remember correctly, we saw the sun go up last night. Hi, your video's on, you're nodding. So the comment in the chat is, love what you said about kinship networks. Maybe that's me agreeing with Liz too.
Yes. Kinship networks. That came from doing some readings on trans kinship networks, and it made me think about, the idea of having like a disabled second family that we could turn to, and so that's why I included that. It's a very lovely concept, and yeah.
So this is Margaret, and I'm going to read from the chat again. Diane Wiener said, as I mentioned, I became emotional in ways I had not anticipated. I am immensely grateful to you for organizing this conference. I am honored to be in company with everyone. I did not have the spoon to attend the evening session because it's an hour later here, etc. Thanks for everything, everyone.
It honestly has been quite an honor to organize this gathering, and seeing all that's come out of it in just the first day has been incredible. And I'm so excited, and I hope you are all excited for what we're going to learn about today. And all the wonderful panelists are bringing to the table. Just exciting.
This is Margaret again. I'm going to read from the chat. Amelia Marie says, the biggest takeaway for me is how much I don't know and how transformative it is to hear disabled culture. I was raised in a disabled family. Both of my parents used wheelchairs, and I was one of the first kids in disabled spaces in our area. And I only know a fraction of our collective history in San Diego.
Sharing that, Amelia Marie. Yes, disabled culture. The term was so revealing to me when I thought about it deeply over the past several years, just thinking about it really to me showed that there was a family out there for me, like a collection of people who share something, even if it manifests differently, there's a collection of people out there that can stand in solidarity, I can be in community with. We can create things together. We can, do so many things together. So, I think that the power of disabled culture is incredible. And I'm glad that, I can't remember who said this yesterday, but someone said that disability culture is spreading. So credit to that person. I'm said that.
So Margaret again, reading from the chat, Adam said, this feels kind of silly, but my campus is one of the ones with a DCC in the work. But I had forgotten that fact since my daily work doesn't intersect with cultural centers too often. So now I want to look into getting involved on my own campus.
Yes, definitely agreed. Collaboration is huge. I think a lot of our cultural centers at UIC, which we have the privilege of having, do a lot of collaborations together, and the programming comes out really impactful for a lot of students. So I think, yes, definitely, and also just like your personal work interacting with cultural centers, like whether it's doing a talk or facilitating a conversation between people, I think that your work can probably make a really big impact on students who may not study disability themselves. So that's great.
So this is Margaret reading from the chat. Liz said, yes, go Adam and UMD, which I think University of Maryland is UMD. Let me know if I'm wrong. And then Sean said in the chat, I'm very excited because one of our undergraduate students has been in every session. She is one of the leaders in our movement for a DCC at Northern Arizona University. Go AK. That got me going. And then, yay, so Sean is sharing an email with Adam, and then Adam sharing an email back. And Liz is saying, Sean and student, I will add you all to the map as pending. So we're making knowledge as we get together again for a welcome session.
Yeah. I do have a direct message question that I can share. The person writes, appreciate all that has been shared so far and curious about how DCCs play a role in other countries. What can we learn from cross-country movements among disabled students and scholars, as well as allies in higher education settings? I think that's a really great question because quite obviously, all of the centers that we're featuring here are United States based. And even among Western countries, disability culture differs. How, whether it's policy, whether it's like the culture itself, the recognition of disabled people, the kind of healthcare access that's in different countries. And then if you expand that to the rest of the world, going beyond the Western world, disability culture is different for every country. And so I think it's important to, and perhaps a future iteration of the symposium, if we do one in the future, another one in the future, which we hope to do, is, connecting with folks from like going beyond the United States, going international and seeing what else is out there, and building those connections to communities, seeing what other folks have to offer, what practices we can incorporate and honor, and build that solidarity among the disability community internationally.
So this is Margaret. Kind of related to what we were just talking about, Trail is saying, interesting question. It is totally different and very diverse. For example, Western versus Middle East. And if it's okay, and actually Trail, there was an event at the University of Chicago recently that was about MENA countries and disability activism, and I can try to dig it up for you if you're interested.
I would love to see that. I would love to see it. And I guess when I wrote Western countries, I was like thinking about Europe versus the Middle East.
Thank you. So this is Margaret speaking again. There's a comment that came in the chat and then one that came directly that are kind of related. So I'm going to read those out. So Emily said, I'm looking forward to bringing a DCC to my own campus and finally having a community. As a student, it has been very hard to be on my own in developing my identity. And then a direct message that I think speaks to the same idea is this person said, yes, thank you so much for organizing this symposium. Oftentimes in this work, it is easy to feel alone and siloed. It is so great to meet everyone. I am so happy we are creating this space for ourselves to make more spaces for students to feel a sense of relief, affinity, community, and belonging. Wow, all caps.
Both of those comments were incredibly meaningful. And as one of the things I mentioned earlier was that disability has historically been individualized, and there are many structures of power and infrastructure to ensure that we are individualized. And that shouldn't be the case. And I hope in a disability future, I hope that we ensure that community is infrastructuralized. And this is a way of doing that, right? Building a DCC shows that disability matters on campus, that the community is there, and that people are welcome to develop their identity, in a fluid and organic and authentic ways. And that's the power of DCCs, hopefully, and ultimately and hopefully that will come to fruition. And I wish you all the best in your creation of the DCC.
There's so many good comments coming in through the chat, but I'm kind of looking at the time and I wonder if we should kind of let people know how the day will unfold. We are saving these chats, so please take a moment to peruse if that's accessible for you, and we will be posting this later.
Yes. So thank you all for your discussion in the chat and vocally. Mike, I appreciate your contributions, and thank you for letting me talk about my hopes and aspirations for the future and our reflection of yesterday as well. I really appreciate that. So welcome again, everyone, to day 2. We'll be taking a break until 11 o'clock Central, so about 30 minutes. when we'll come back together for a panel on lessons from building. And for a few previews, after a lunch break, we'll have a couple of breakout sessions that have separate Zoom rooms. So keep that in mind. Even though all of the links for yesterday were the same, today we have an A sessions and a B sessions that have separate Zoom links to access those rooms. So you have a choice of basically choosing which event you want to see. These are happening simultaneously. And those are listed on the event schedule as A1 and A2 and B2, or sorry, B1 and B2. And so we hope you can join us as well for at the last session for an experimental, unrecorded closing session that will be in a reverse panel, is what we're calling it, where you as the attendees will be centered. To answer Sean's question, all of the sessions today, except for the very last one, will be recorded. So everything that you're seeing right now, and then for most of the day will be recorded. The rest of, and then the very last one will not be recorded. This is the one I'm talking about right now as well. So it's an experimental, unrecorded closing session that will be a reverse panel where you as attendees will be centered. And Margaret just posted a link in the chat. You can submit questions in advance, or you can just come to the session with questions, either way. And so you as attendees will be centered. So come with questions or ideas you want to discuss, and we can knowledge, co-mentor, share the wealth of knowledge that we all have with each other, whether you have been with experiences, whether you have experiences with DCCs or not. Regardless, we want your input. If you want to submit a question or idea, Margaret posted it in the chat. And that's all. We'll see you all in about 30 minutes for the next plenary, which is lessons from building. And yeah, thank you all so much. See you in a little bit.